Okay, thanks everyone. How are you doing? Yeah, you feeling a sense of resilience as you go into the, I guess we're not the home stretch, that's this afternoon. Yeah, so you still have to sort of be perky at this point. So, let me just get a sense in the room. How many of you are in the midst of launching, let me start, who have not even thought of launching a collective impact approach? Okay. How many of you have thought about it? Okay. How many of you have actually thought about it and are actually in the process of doing something about it? Okay, very good. And how many of you think, in the middle of it? Okay. Good, because one doesn't always know at the beginning, right? Because one of my favorite books is a book called Getting to Maybe, How the World Has Changed. And it's a wonderful book on social change and innovation. And it just talks about, when you're working at this issue of change, you're always working toward maybe, not sure, right? And matter of fact, they say if you ever are not getting to maybe, you should probably rethink what you're doing, because it's probably not, you've got it down to such doable things that there's no sense of risk that you're sort of taking. And in social change, it's very hard to say, hey, it's going to work. So let's talk about these first 12 months and of starting something. Now, am I too, boy, you guys are going to have a hard time no matter where I stand. You can see it? Should I stay here or should I go somewhere else? Because you would be it's your table that's the hardest one. So as long as you can see, we're good. Okay. So what we've got here is really the, sorry. That's the next slide. I'm going to share this with you the way I would talk to my board chairman, and I'm going to lay it out in terms of what it is that that we're going to do in the first year. But just remember this: if only it were that easy, right? So it's not that easy, but that's okay. At this point, don't worry about, am I doing it right? Don't judge. Don't worry about how do I do that? Where do I get the resources? Just listen to the story, okay? Because it's just really, if you can get this framework in place for yourself, there's lots of time to think about how I'm going to implement it, okay? So what you've got here is, you'll get these slides. And you don't have to read all the fine print on this one because it's absolutely not what I'm trying to talk about. But so much of this is about these, we call them the first 4 phases. And they're really around kind of the things that we do. The phases around governance and infrastructure, strategic planning, community involvement, and then evaluation and improvement. And then they call it the pre-launch work, the initiate action work, and then the organize for impact work, okay? And then it takes us to the last one, implementing and sustaining impact. Where this orange is, that's kind of what happens in the first 12 to 18 months, okay? So that's all that slide is trying to describe. Now, let's just go back through the fundamentals. And I honestly believe that if you go back to your office after this gathering and you can't do common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and the backbone organization, I would say that your director should make you pay personally for this conference. So let's just do this together. Common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, the backbone organization. Okay? One more time, without me. Nice. That's something to remember because it actually, those are just placeholders. But what's so nice about what they've done here in Collective Impact that we never did, describing the same amount of work, is to keep it into these kind of simple 5 areas, because in your mind you can kind of group them, okay? Now, what's so important to understand is that those 5 do not happen linearly. They all happen at the same time. Some people are looking at me, what does that even mean? You can't say that to me. They have to be linear. They're not linear. These are the 5 activities in a collective impact approach. Are you with me? Good. Okay. So, what we're doing, right, is that as we're doing this work together, we're going to take it through a variety of phases of work. So, sorry, I need to move this laptop because I keep looking at it and going, why can't I see my slide? Okay, so I go to my board chair. I'm having a meeting. We're on our second glass of wine. And the board chair says, so Paul, I get this collective impact work that you're doing, right? I get it. It just feels a little bit heady to me, and I don't actually know what we're going to accomplish this year. Like, what are we actually going to get done, right? My glasses aren't letting me see what we're actually going to get done. Okay. And, oh, coffee cup. So, I say, look, at its base, what we're going to try and do is to build a community momentum. But we also need to change the way that our community thinks about this work. Right? So in the next 12 months, that becomes really important. We also want to deepen the level of engagement that is going to occur in this community around this. Now, at its most basic approach, we want to shift, first of all, the way that our community thinks about this work. So first of all, we got to talk about how we move our thinking from deficit-based to asset-based. And what we mean by this is that so often we will come into an issue like child wellness, and we will be wanting to solve a problem. So let's say we look at children and then we say we want to solve childhood obesity, right? And you can imagine when children hear that word. Like I think it's just this kind of this strange phenomena about how we talk about people like me, right? And we use this horrible kind of language to try and solve a problem. And it's judgmental. It's like saying you're an alcoholic, or something like that. You're a druggie, right? But that's how we are in society. So you can imagine if we have this childhood obesity campaign and we go into all of our schools, right? And we call everyone obese, and these skinny little girls, who look at these models. You know what I mean? We create this horrible kind of environment. And yet that's how we do things so often in community change. And yet, what if we looked at it and we said, if we want to look at childhood well-being, let's look at all the assets that we have to make that happen, right? So first of all, we have all these lovely children, right, who are in schools. Hey, folks at the door, hey, close the door. Thank you. So we have all these lovely children, right? And we've got these wonderful schools. And we have all these parents that care about their kids, right? And we have all these playgrounds. And we have all these sports facilities. And we have all these coaches that volunteer. And we have all these, like literally hundreds of things going on in our community that foster childhood well-being. And the fact is, we never talk about them because we're so busy talking about obesity, right? So we do this on every issue, right? We judge the poor, right? We judge the fat. You know, we judge those who drink too much, right? We judge those who are lonely. And so we're very deficit-based. And what we need to do is we need to change the way we talk and think about our work from asset-based. So we always say in our community, we're fighting poverty, yeah. But guess what? The system actually works because 85% of us are not poor. So 85%, when I never got 85% in school ever until I got into my master's degree. Never. So I'm thinking 85 is pretty good, right? And I think to myself, if my son gets 50% in math or 85 in math, I'm going to work really differently with those two kids. Because the 50% doesn't really get math. The 85% really gets math and just wants to make it better. So what happens if on childhood well-being, 85% of our children are actually doing really well, and we want to make it 90? Are we going to work very differently than if we think, oh, we're going to fight childhood obesity, and now we start looking at every child as obese? Essentially, that's how we act, right? And we have to stop thinking in those terms. Big, big challenge. Because so often we get funded by how bad we make things look and how impossible we seem them to be, right? It serves no one well. It doesn't serve the people who are sick, who have a problem. It doesn't serve them well. It doesn't serve your organization well. It doesn't serve our community well, because you will not take the assets of your community and use them toward your deficit. And, you know, I can tear up on this one. I'm so passionate about it, and I'll shut up in a minute, right? And I'll go on. I'm on a soapbox right now, so let me stand here for a bit. You know, I'm a John McKnight Asset-Based Community Development Fellow. So there's 50 of us in the world. Michelle Obama is one of them. Was very proud of that. And we think about the world this way, and we teach it. But it's just really important to us to understand that in collective impact, that if we don't bring our assets together, it's over. My board chair at this point says, "Can I have a third glass of wine, please?" But you get that? If we don't bring our assets together, it's over, because that's collective impact. Can you imagine, we want to deal with childhood obesity. We've come up with a better word, first of all, to deal with this. It's childhood wellness that we're wanting to deal with. And we start to look at all those assets that we have available to us. We look at all of our community parks. We look at all the volunteers. We look at all of our sports teams. We look at all of our medical facilities. We look at all the parents in particular, the teachers, all of these assets, and they all want the same thing. And they want it, like, in their hearts. They're passionate about wellness of children, right? Most of them have dedicated their lives to the wellness of children. Doesn't that excite you? From harnessing that energy, all of those assets, and bringing them into a common agenda and a shared understanding, which is how you could talk about shared measurement, you know? And that we agree this is how we're going to work together, and we think it's going to help. Beautiful, huh? It's just absolutely friggin' beautiful when that comes together, you know? And now we're not talking about solving a problem. We're talking about bringing all of our strengths into one place, and we're going to focus them like a light through a prism, right? You know, we're going to cause a fire at the other end, and it's going to be a revolution for good. Okay, third glass of wine arrives. Okay, now, We have to put trust and relationships at the center, meaning that we're going to spend some time together, right? We're going to get to know one another. We're not going to make this optional. That's simple, you know? Because we don't trust one another, how are we going to work together? How are you going to give up? You know when this really works? Sitting in St. Catherine's, the YMCA, 11 organizations around the table. We're talking just like this. And the YMCA executive director, like a light goes off in his head, says, I get it. I'm going to give you half a position and $10,000 because that's all I have the authority to give. But I'm giving it right now. And he looked to the person to his right and he said, and what are you giving? I can't tell you the number of people who come into collective impact like this. They expect to get something. You're going to get more than you ever expected to get, but you got to give something first. You know, where are we going to get the money? And I go, oh, sorry, I said that word once yesterday, and I can't say it again today. What the bleep, huh? Where are we going to get the money? We're talking about the wellness of children. We're spending like probably in Vermont alone several hundreds of millions of dollars for the wellness of children, and you're asking me where we're going to get the money to hold a bunch of meetings? Really? Right? Where are we going to get the time? When we've already all agreed that if we keep working harder, smarter, and faster, nothing's going to change. Right? So you see where I'm at with this? So we're going to sit down and talk to one another and build a relationship until we're all willing to trust each other well enough so that we're going to put some of our assets on the table toward this. Because if we don't all put something in, nothing's going to happen. Shift to inclusive data. So here again, one of the first things I ask in a collective impact around shared measurement is you go around and ask all of your partners, what's the information you use, right, to make decisions? And what's the information you'd like to have, but you don't have to make decisions? And I gather all of that data, and then I try to give the people who don't have data, that want data, but now I give it to them. So I do an exchange first of all. Then what we start to do is we take data from those people, we take it away from those people who protect data. Oh, you know, you can't understand statistics, or you can do anything with statistics, right? You know, those people, they're technocrats, and we got to say no. We have to take the risk of sharing data with everyone, and we have to share it in a way that we can understand it, right? Because data is our friend, and our sector is not good at using it for the most part. And for the most part, we use it selectively, we use it out of context, right? It's like, you know, when I was in theology, the thing that got us the most upset was when someone would take a little piece of scripture, or even half of a verse, and they would justify something based on it. Totally out of context, totally out of understanding, right? But we do that with data all the time, and somehow we think that's okay. But the thing is, it's not just professionals that have to understand the data. It's everyone, you know? My favorite project is called the Seattle approach, or the Seattle project, and social planning councils often use that, where they'll go out and they'll look at an issue or a series of issues in the community, and they'll start to lay out it from a data perspective. Then they take it to the average people in the community, and they say, is this good enough? So here's all the data on youth unemployment. Is that good enough? Here's all the data on obesity. Is that good enough, right? So they take out data like that, and they ask the community to respond to it. And if that's not good enough, then what is good enough? Well, it'd be a lot better if we had, let's say, 80% of our children were highly active, and right now it seems like only about 65 are. Okay, so we got a 15% gap. Great, we can work with that. And you see now, if you're going to develop your community plan, how you can nicely work with that. Then you start to go out and you do community engagement. What would it take to get a 15% difference so that instead of 65, 80% of children are active? How are we going to do that as a community? Doesn't that feel like so much easier to work with, right, than going out and saying, how are we going to end obesity? You get it? Right? But data is our friend, and in collective impact, It's a big part of this work, is using data effectively. Okay? So it's a change in thinking. Okay? Energy. So part of this is that we need to start to think about how are we using our energy as a community on this issue of childhood well-being, right? Where is the energy going right now? And it's important because energy is money and time and resources. So it's kind of like saying, where are we putting most of our money right now in terms of this fight to wellness? Where do we have the most volunteers around wellness, right, for children? Where do we have the most infrastructure around wellness? So once we start to identify that, do you see how by doing that, we begin to say this is how the system is currently acting? I'm getting like goosebumps, huh? Like if you start going to an asset orientation, we're all bringing the best toward, and we go like, holy mackerel, we got a lot in Vermont that help people, right? You know, and then we go to from there to really building that sense of trust and that sense that we're giving up something to the betterment of the whole. You know, we really understand what's going on. We all understand the data. We've started to figure out where we're putting our energy. It allows us then to see our blind spots. What aren't we doing to enable wellness here? And then we do that over a period of a year. And we do this like with a minimum of 1,000 to 2,000 people. You know, and we do some really cool stuff. Like we go into schools and we talk to children. We bring parents together. We do bus tours all around, having people look at things that are really kind of neat. We show up in neighborhoods. We have wellness parties. Wouldn't that be great? Instead of having wellness roundtable conversations, having wellness parties all over our city, right? Where people come together, eat healthy food, play games together, and then have some time to talk together about what it would take to, and they have some voting boards or whatever it might be. Like, why not? Like, why do we always have to bring people together at 7 o'clock at night, you know, in a dingy room and have them sit at tables and talk to one another in an artificial way and think somehow that's better engagement than throwing a party all over the city, you know, 20 of them, where we have these wonderful activities that allow them to start to mark in what they think should happen and to sign up for ongoing communication and that kind of thing. That's the kind of thinking that we want to have. By this time, my board chair is just saying, wow, I'm just, Paul, I just can't say thank you enough for taking on this work. Okay, so then we go, okay, so then what is it that we are actually going to do? He's saying, you know, she's saying, I'm so excited about this, Paul, but like I have to take it back to the board and I have to tell them what are we going to get done this year, okay? And there are 6 things that we're going to do, and I'll read them out loud, okay? The first one is we're going to build community will. Explain that to me, she says. I say, well, look, right now, we're all over the map around community wellness. Huh? I mean, childhood wellness. We're all over the map around childhood wellness. And it's not really on the forefront of the agenda. But we've got this sense that we can bring it to the forefront of the agenda, that it's talked about more in the media, that schools are going to take it on as a strategic direction, that parents are going to understand why it's important for their kids. So what we're wanting to do this year is that we're going to really do a engagement strategy, and we're going to connect with at least 1,000, and our goal is actually 2,000 people. And we're going to get them to commit to signing up to ongoing communication. And we're going to put a newsletter together to keep communicating with them and feeding back what we're learning. And in doing this, we're going to create a listening team, right, and a data team And we're going to go out and we're going to host at least 50, it could be as many as 100 events this year, right? And we're going to, they're going to be community conversations, they're going to be things that we do in schools, they're going to be bus tours, they're going to be street parties, they're going to be, you name it, all these kinds of things. And all of the partners are going to take on some of these engagement processes. That's how we're going to build community will. We're going to try to bring the media in on this as a partner. We're going to try to get some corporate sponsors to work with us here. But you get it? We need to build momentum. We got to put this issue in the next year at the forefront of people's minds. Okay, I get that. I get that. Okay, I understand why that's important, particularly when you start talking about a collective impact, right? It's really important for us to think this way. Okay, what else are we going to do? Well, we're going to do some quick win projects. What do you mean by that? Well, look, as we're doing our community will building, we're going to start looking at some quick win projects. And here are a couple that have come up. We already know that there are 7 parks that have derelict playgrounds, and they're actually unsafe. And so we've put together a little 6-month working team that's going to go and try and both raise the money for those 6 parks. Now, you think that's a lot. We've already got 50% raised through some sort of granting process. But we're going to raise the other 50%, and we're going to get those all built within 6 months. And we're going to do this because there is now already 89 organizations that are working together on this community wellness plan. We've already been pulling that together with people, the child wellness plan. And we have a lot of resources here that we're going to make, and we're going to be sure that it's going to be. And so why did you choose that project, the chair said? Well, look, it's not about the project. It's about 2 things. One is we want to show that by working together we can get more done. We want to practice working together. And we also want to show some momentum, right? The other thing, any other ones? Yeah, well, we've got some people that have given us a commitment from the school board that has said that we're gonna do over the next 6 months, we're gonna do at least 2 classes with all children aged 6 to 12 on childhood wellness, on wellness. And we're going to develop a curriculum in the first month. People say that they're very confident in doing that. And then we've already got the schools willing to implement that all the way through. Wow, that's an ambitious project. Yeah, and I think it'll be very good. And in that, we're going to learn a lot from the children because it's an interactive kind of a process. So they're going to give us as much feedback as we're going to. I'm making these things up as I go, by the way. You know, they're going to be giving us feedback while they take the class, right? So these quick win projects, I love them. You don't hear this too often in collective impact training, but I've been on the ground for so many years, and I just find that if we go into a community planning process and an engagement process, it's too heady for most people. They need some action. So what I do is I set up these 6-month work teams, right? And I basically just get projects that can be completed that just has a 6-month mandate. And you know what? I have never found it easier to recruit people than to say, we need to get 7 playgrounds built in 6 months. We've already got half the money. You got to raise the other half of the money and get them built. Are you up to it? Right? I get some pretty high-performing, competitive people that if I asked them to come and sit at a work table, a planning table, they'd go friggin' crazy. But they just chop at the bit for that kind of an opportunity. It's the kind of volunteer opportunity we all love, right? Because it's tangible, it's getting something done quick, and it has a great result. All the United Way people are shaking their heads. They got it. Yeah, they know exactly what we're talking about, right? These action-oriented people. Okay, I love it. We're going to do all this community will building, and we're going to develop that quick plan, and then what? Well, ultimately, at the end of 12 months, but not before. Matter of fact, we've made a promise to our community that we are not going to write a community plan for at least 12 months. My board chair, she shakes her head and said, but that's curious. Why would it take so long, first of all? And secondly, why would you make that promise? Because it seems every time we talk about the community plan, almost everyone we talk to says, I could write that tomorrow. I know exactly what needs to be done. And I always say, well, that's exactly the problem, right? We got to bring everything that we know, but we all know exactly what needs to be done. Somehow, we got to figure out why isn't that doing what we need it to do, right? So it's going to take time. So let's just put that on hold for a while, and let's say that we're going to spend the next 12 months, technically we call it the emergent phase. The emergent phase is the deliberately creative phase in which we think about new ideas and we take time to bond in a new way and we build the momentum to move forward. Yeah, but don't you think we could just do that after we have the plan? Don't you think it's better once you write a plan, then build momentum? And I say to my board chair, traditionally, yes. Okay, I get that, right? And that's been the premise of most strategic planning. The problem is strategic planning doesn't work anymore for the most part. We write these plans and then nobody does anything about them except for a few people that are the burden tops, and they keep freaking out that nobody cares about the plan that was written, right? And so the other thing is that for most of us today is that when a small group of people write a plan, everyone else is cynical about it. We're just cynical about leadership. So unless we involve everyone and do the work of engagement ahead of time and help people see that their ideas are embedded in the plan and that they're required to implement the plan, plans just don't get implemented anymore these days. Don't know why, it's just changed. And collective impact takes that into account. That a small group of people can't just write a plan and expect everybody to follow it. And if we're going to have a common agenda, it requires that we take the time to get common input. So a big part of this writing of the plan is to get everybody on the same page at multiple levels. And I know this is always a little bit sucky, but at Tamarack we teach head, heart, and hands, right? So we got to get them in the right headspace. And so that's why those, the ways of thinking are important to us. They got to have their heart in it. As our donors often say, you got to find a way to get my heart onto my sleeve, right? So somehow you got to bring my passion for good to the point where I'm willing to do something about it, right? So the heart is a big thing here, and we forget about the heart a lot as professionals. Somehow we think the heart gets in the way, even though we know that we have hearts and that we care. That's a technical thing, right? But when we become passionate about something, it's sometimes seen as a detriment rather than a strength. And we need to be passionate if we're going to ensure that children have well-being. And we need to be passionate about working together, right? And then the hands are the actual strategies and the strategies and the strategic directions. What are we actually going to do? So we need to come together at all three levels, and we need to take that year to come together at those three levels. Does that make sense? That's why we often try to say we're going to write a community plan, but not for the first year. Okay, I get it. We're building community will through a community engagement process, right? We're going to develop these quick win projects to keep things moving and get a sense that we're being active. We're going to be working toward drafting a community plan. And I often like to, when I put these together, I want to identify in the first month of forming as a collective impact who is actually responsible. Where I identify the team that's going to write the plan. Because I need them to know that they're getting the information they need if they're going to write the plan and that they get what we're trying to do. I don't want to appoint that person near the end. Just a little trick, right? Okay, then what? We need to formalize the network. Okay? Well, what do you mean by that? She says. Well, look, a year from now, we're going to have a common agenda and a shared measurement system. We're going to have a governance model, which is our backbone structure, to make this thing all happen. But how is it a community plan? who signs off on it? Oh, never thought of that. Most of us don't, right? We think if we all worked on it together, it's our plan. I'm going to tell you a little story. In Des Moines, Iowa, we looked at a community wellness project it took us 18 months to launch the plan. When we launched the plan, there were nearly 200 people in the room. And we had a launch day, full day. We talked about what we learned. We talked about why the plan is what it is. The plan had 5 strategic directions and about 10 strategies within each direction. And we broke the 200 people into groups that then went through and reviewed each of the strategic directions, added things, took things out. We did our final kind of editing. And then came the moment of the call to action. Who's in? And I say, you ever been to a Billy Graham crusade? Anybody? Are you serious? I've been to one. I'm a Canadian. Jeez, you got to go to a crusade sometime. It's like a cultural experience, right? And at the end, he calls forth the masses. And people just start coming down the aisles and they renew their lives. And, sorry, I don't mean to be cynical about it. It's quite enjoyable, actually. And there's a certain song that he always sang, right? Well, in Des Moines, I felt like I was at a friggin' Billy Graham crusade, right? As we were going, people were standing up. And, an organization that, sort of like, a group would stand up, such and such school, we're in. Des Moines school system, we're in, right? So-and-so and so-and-so. I'm not coming up with names. But literally, in that, it was like they were popping up all over. And the energy was just palatable. And then sometimes someone would stand up and they'd say, this is why we're in. And then they would talk for a little while, right? And the amount of money they raised right after, right? So they all signed on. At their first quarterly meeting, how many members now came? Can you guess? Anybody? 172. And they were disappointed because they wanted 200. Yeah. 172 organizations showed up to their quarterly meeting. Every quarter they have a 2-hour meeting, which is a check-in. Okay? And it's amazing the amount of activity. So then there are 2 things that start to unfold as you're implementing. The plan gets implemented, but then the 172 partners are all changing as well. They're starting to develop all their own plans. So the one thing that we always end every quarterly meeting with is, well, how do you think it's going? And is there anything you've been inspired to do in the last quarter? Let us know, and we'll tell everyone else. And all of that becomes kind of, so we don't worry about attribution in collective impact. We only worry about contribution. If you're an evaluator, right, I can send you a paper. It's beautiful. Start thinking contribution over attribution and measure contribution. Particularly in collective impact, it really works and it matters. But attribution, you have to kind of start to break down, well, what percentage of our influence or our planning or our activities contributed to that outcome. Rather, all we do is we say, okay, here are our core outcomes, and then here are the outcomes that we contributed to. As long as the partner's saying, yeah, you did, you inspired us, or you helped us this way, or whatever it is, that's all that mattered in that case, right? Build community will, quick wins, draft a community plan, formalize the network, agree on a governance model. Okay, now, you're saying to me, Paul, why are you bringing up governance model when we always talk about the backbone organization? Because it's confusing to think of the backbone organization as more than a governance model. but it is a governance model that is structured, and there's lots that we can learn from how different backbone organizations have been structured and the roles of them in terms of governance. So the way it mostly works is that you end up having a, just looking at the time, I forgot my watch over there. It's 25 after 11, so how much time do I have? I have till 12. It's 11:16 according to my watch. This is Paul time. It's 11:24 for you. It's 11:16 for me. Just so you know. Oh, let's go halfway. Okay, 20 after. Where was I? Yeah. So look, what we normally do is I think about it this way, right? We want a fiscal sponsor. In Canada, United Ways are beautiful for this because they're kind of able to do this, right? But all kinds of organizations can. And the fiscal sponsor is basically responsible for three things. All the staff use their staff, all the staff that get hired into the backbone team use their HR policy. You use their financial system, and they deal with all legal issues. Because from a governance perspective, if the board isn't given those three things, they're not going to sponsor you, right? Now, the reason that you want a fiscal sponsor is because they can accept money, and donors and funders have confidence in them. So you want to make sure that there's someone like that. So if you incorporate, they're going to say, well, this is all good, lots of good energy here, but you don't have a track record. And you're not big enough to really have good, strong financial systems. You're not big enough to have good HR systems. And why would you put all the energy to develop all of those, right? So find a fiscal sponsor that is good, that is credible, and whose board is willing to give up strategy. Because really then you create a leadership roundtable, okay? A leadership roundtable is normally made up of, let's say if it's 16 members, right? 4 members from the business community, 4 from government, 4 from the voluntary sector, and 4 from people with lived experience. So if we're going to do wellness, what we would look for is 4 people with lived experience, probably try to find maybe I would try to find 2 young people between 16 and 20 years of age. I would find 2 parents who have younger children. That's what I would do in that case. They could be, it could be some form of a contest. You could figure out how to do that, but it would be great to have those lived experience people there. Then I would have 4 not-for-profits, and that would be, of all the not-for-profits out there, who you select has to do with who's most passionate about this work and working as a collective impact, who's willing to put resources forward, but also who's well trusted by the rest of the not-for-profit sector. Remember, leaders in this work are those who, when they invite 10 people to a meeting, 8 always show up. Those are the kind of leaders we're trying to recruit on all of our leadership places. Government, we always look at MUSH, municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals. Obviously, federal government, state government. So we start looking at that and we say, who are the people that are both most passionate about this and who can do something about it? Obviously, I would choose one of the 4. Has to be someone from the school system. Again, don't ever do this, okay? I seldom say that, but I'm telling you now. Don't ever bring in a position. You will get screwed every time. Bring in people. So the superintendent of schools could just be a real jerk, right? But feels pressured into being on your, could be pressured to be on your committee, and is disruptive, or constantly wants to send a designate. has no passion or commitment. Find people who are passionate and committed. No designates allowed. If you're going to commit, you got to commit, right? You got to be able to have those kind of conversations with people. You know, you probably want to get someone in there that has influence over policy, fairly high level at the government side, because you need some policy changes to occur, and you need people to be able to champion those, right? On the business side, if you're looking at bringing in 4 business leaders to that round table, go for lived experience. But one of the things you might want to do is you might want to get, you guys have Toys R Us? Yeah, you might want to get the manager of the regional manager for Toys R Us, or some other business that makes a lot of money off of children, because they can be very influential with other businesses, but only if it's a good person and you know them, right? Then you might want to go after some business leaders that are already active in the school system, right? Maybe as a school board trustee or something like that. You may want to go after a business person that has a strong marketing background and that cares a lot about children and maybe has some experience marketing for clients that have that work with children or that sell to children. You know what I mean? That's how we're making up our leadership roundtable. So we have our fiscal sponsor, we have our leadership roundtable. Then we're going to start setting up our working teams. So our listening team, our data team, and our action teams. See where I'm going? That's all the backbone organization. And then a staff team. Sorry, before I do that, the staff team is normally made up of a individual that has the ability to convene a lot of people, knows the community very well, people trust the individual, and they have the ability to bring things together. So typically it's someone that's a fairly seasoned executive director of some sort of organization who has a strong reputation. I say that because they're the kind of person who has to see both the forest and the trees. They can implement stuff, but they're always seeing the big picture, right? They're good at raising money. They know how to develop, they know how to work on policy changes. They can manage a small staff. You see where I'm going? So you need someone who has that experience and background. And it's complicated because now we've got this large network of people that they're working with, right? Then there is normally a project officer, and depending how big you are, you have 2 of them. So what happens is that, you know, the listening team, if you're going to run 50 to 80 to 100 events, right? Now, obviously, your staff aren't going to run all those events. But if you already have 82 partners, see where I'm going? That those partners are going to take on events for you. Leadership roundtable members are going to take events, but they still need to be supported. And even if the school board might say, okay, we'll take on that curriculum thing, still someone's got to be a liaison between the people who are implementing it and the project itself. How can we be helpful? Are there any problems that you're achieving? Can we raise some money for you? What can we do to help you be successful? Are you meeting your timeline? So someone's just got to be managing all of that, and sometimes you're going to be monitoring, you know, between 20 and 30 activities at a time. And in bigger campaigns, that's even higher, so you'll have 2 project officers. And then typically you'll have 1 admin person that is working on your database. Your database is extremely important in your governance process because you want to know who your members are. So anyone that allows you to communicate with them on a regular basis, they are your members. And so you want to have a good 1,000 to 2,000 of those members before you're ready to launch, of people who are committed and who've been involved and active and who've signed up and who care. Can you see why I'm going to talk about funding in a little while? If all of that's in place and you came to a funder, like, you know, you're pretty ready at this point to do an ask, huh? Because they're going like, wow, you know, you guys are organized. That's your, but think about all of that, your staff team, your leadership roundtable, your fiscal sponsor, your working groups. That's your backbone structure, your backbone organization, right? That's why I said this yesterday as well. When a group comes to me and says, oh, we're the backbone organization for this collective impact, I always go, no, you're not. That's what I said to myself. But to them I go, oh, really? Tell me more. Because I already know then that it's an immature collective impact. But if they say we are the staff team that is helping to lead the backbone structure, right? Then I know, okay, they're advanced. They get it, right? Or we're the fiscal sponsor. That's often what they mean. We're the fiscal sponsor of the backbone role. See where I'm going? Yeah. So, of course, in the community plan, we're going to write about what we learned from our community engagement process. We're going to talk about all of the momentum we've built to date and how many people have signed up for ongoing communication. We're going to write about the governance structure. We're going to have all the data from our data team, right? And it's all going to be in our community plan. Like, that's not, like, honestly, I get chills when I talk like that. Like, it's so beautiful that it's all in there, and we've done that over a period of a year, and it's like, it's friggin' amazing, huh? Because then we get to this last one, we're going to raise the funds. Why? Because what we said is that we've got on our leadership roundtable, 2 of them are funders. We've engaged over 1,000 people, but guess what? We engaged 32 funders. And we've had special relationships to them. And guess what? We had a little secret working group. This is Paul's secret sauce. I always set up one of these. It's a little working group. We call them the strategic engagement team, right? And they make sure that our funders are warm, that they're involved, that they get taken out for special lunches, right? And get informed about what's going on, right? We try to find little $5,000 grants for them to pepper. You know, got this working team, and they got a little problem. You guys can give $5,000 just to solve it, you know? We get them involved. So then when we get to this point, they're asking us, how can we help? That's what you want at that point. How can we help? Right? So that's the first year's work, and my board chair just looks me right in the eye and says, Paul, you're the best hire I've ever had. You're the best hire I've ever had. I am just so excited about this. There you go. Now, there's a whole bunch more slides. I will take you through them very quickly, but mainly they're for your reviewing later, because this is all going to be put on the site. But before I do that, let's do a bit of a Q&A. Okay? Good. I'm going to run. You have to talk into the mic, okay?
I'm puzzled about the timing of the people that you have in your leadership team and the staff team and the year-long process of involving all these people who are already doing all this work. I mean, I know you said in the beginning everything happens at the same time, but where the leadership team, at what point are they sort of plucked out from all the people who have come together, or have you identified them first? I mean, I'm confused about the timing of how this works with the people.
Oh, you hold on. You hold on. So, I mean, ultimately, what we need to do is, obviously, Margaret Mead was right. Does everyone love her like I love her? Really? Do you have a secret crush on her too? Yeah. She said, you know, never doubt that a small group of people will change the world. In reality, it's the only thing it ever has. Right? What she doesn't talk about is what do they do? Well, then they engage another level and another level. So ultimately, you know, I've never seen this not start with maybe 5 people, 7 people having that seminal meeting. And that seminal meeting in a collective impact always goes down in history, right? And they're saying, we got to do more. And then there's always these kind of sub-stories, right? I remember when Carol and Madeline met. Carol was the head of the Community Foundation. Madeline was the head of Human Services for the city. And Carolyn had just been in Russia, and a woman asked her, how can a rich country like yours have so much poverty? And that just, she couldn't shake it. So she came back and she talked to Madeline at the city, and Madeline was saying, you know, I've been going through this crisis too. I literally have 8,000 employees, and I can't figure out how we can't do more. So that has always gone down in history. It's like 11 years later, that moment. And then the first meeting that they had, by bringing together some key business people that they really trusted, you know, the mayor, a number of key people, and saying, we got to do more. We can't be proud that Hamilton has the highest child poverty rate in the country, right? And then they start meeting. Okay, what are we going to do next? Well, let's all invite 10 people. Next thing you know, they have a 50-person meeting, right? And so the sectors all start to come together. And then they have more and more of those, and then they organize, and then they get some staff, right? But all of this begins to happen, right? But a lot of what we try to do early on is we start to then map the system. So there's an exercise in my book, Community Conversations, I'm just getting it reprinted. It's sold out again, and I wanted to add a collective impact chapter into it, and I just haven't gotten there. So I still have some copies, but I was going to give half and half for here, but we only had Deepening Community left. And you guys got the last. There's only 400 of those left, so that's being reprinted now too. But in there's an exercise called the Top 100. So you can Google it. If you Google Tamarack Top 100, I'm quite sure that document will come up as a PDF. If not, go onto our website and search it, and it will come up as a PDF. So that's what we do. Yeah, it's a natural process that unfolds, but obviously you've got to start with a small group of people and move out. Others, thoughts, questions, observations. Got to go back here first, and then we'll go there, and then here. Hi, Kathy.
Thank you. I just wanted to,
Say who you are.
I'm Kathy Ainsworth. I'm with Mercy Connections in Burlington. I'm a nonprofit administrator. And we did a collective impact type program, or process 5 or 6 years ago. And one of the things that developed over time was the need to reinforce shared language. And the word shared language hasn't come up yet, but in the beginning, it comes up with, building trust and developing your teams, and especially with different sectors at the table, we found that we had to actually rename an entire process. And it took a long time because people really disagreed with the words that were being used. And I found that was also important with the messaging that we were, who we were talking to. We had to make sure that what we were saying was acceptable to all of the demographics, and some of the words we used were just not good enough. So we ended up with something called, at one point, managing an economically diverse workforce, because dealing with the issues of poverty, or there were just all of these catchwords. But do you see that in all places, or is that just one of the iterations of our thing?
Well, normally at that point, what I would ask, is no problem. Normally what I would ask at that point is, how diverse is your leadership roundtable, and how diverse are your members? Because if your members are already business leaders, government leaders, people with lived experience leaders, and not-for-profit leaders, you're never going to have shared language, or nor are you going to care that you do. So my question would be, why did you care about having a shared language? Right? And I get that. I know why you did, because you explained it. But I would ask that, right? I actually don't think shared language is important. I'm much more interested in my business leaders explaining it their way, my government leaders explaining it their way, my community leaders explaining it their way, right? And then what happens is that we learn to write in a way that all of them can understand what's going on. And they become our instant critiquers, right? But normally, you have, I would say that you're heavily weighted with not-for-profits, government. Lived experience. Sure, sure. Right. No, I get that. I get that. But mostly it's a symptom. It's not a solution. So the fact that you're going through that is a symptom of something which you just identified. So you identified the problem, and the symptom was, but that's not the solution was that you were willing to backtrack and listen again. So really what they were saying is, you're not listening to us. Our voices are no longer important here. That's how we feel. And you had to respond in order to rebuild trust. Yeah, that's why that happened. Back there. You want to come up? Getting tired of running back there. You've got such a nice big presence, you can talk to them from here.
Yeah, you betcha.
Stephen.
You betcha. My name is Stephen Marshall. I'm from Burlington, Vermont. I'm an advocate for homeless people in the continuum of care known as Chittenden County Homeless Alliance. We are trying to build a backbone, but I'm afraid we may have put things out of order. So perhaps you could digress a little bit on your sequence and maybe counsel us a little bit on how to do things out of order. That's one question.
Good. Well, just talk to me what order you're in.
Hold on a second. I have to get the other question out. All right, and the other question is about the scale, because it seems like you're on a huge scale compared to what we're going to accomplish in Burlington. So maybe you could scale it back a little bit. Don't know if there's a big difference, but you could help us with that. So, question, what phase are we at? Is Marcy here? Jen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, well, I mean, I obviously need to know a lot more to respond. But the one thing that I always look for when I'm looking at a collective impact that is not emerging the way that it would like is how diverse is your leadership team? Yeah, so we talk about the preconditions for success. I haven't talked about those at all here. So first of all, we talk about the history of collaboration on the issue. What's the history of collaboration in Burlington on homelessness? And we map that. We try to go back. It's what we learned from Future Search, right? Because it's a lovely thing to do. And we actually often just do a timeline. So it's not about the history of homelessness. It's the history of collaboration around homelessness. And we particularly look for pockets of energy. You know, was there a housing shelter built that had a lot of donors and a lot of people committed to it? So that becomes a pocket of energy. But we look for those. The second thing is, how important is the issue to the community at this point? On a scale of 1 to 10, is this like a 3 issue? Is this like a 10 issue? Right? Is it being regularly reported on? Are people talking about it? Right? And again, for who? The third thing that we're looking at is, do funders care about this? On the scale of funding, does anyone care about this in the funding world? Is there funding available for this? And then the fourth one is, who cares? And we're particularly interested in, are there enough powerful people who care? It's not just like, we want, obviously, in a collective impact, we don't want there to be a disproportionate number of powerful people. But in order for collective impact to work, we do need to convince, because it's a system-level change, right? It's not revolution. So we have to engage the system to change. And so the system leaders, there needs to at least be a few of them that are interested in the issue. So we say if any of those 4 conditions are not present, we don't worry about it. We just work harder. So if there hasn't been a strong history of collaboration, we have to slow down and build more collaboration, because that's really the weak point. If we don't have high-level leaders that are interested in working this way, we need to go and talk to some and bring them on board, right? So it's something we have to do. Not that we can't keep going, but we can't leave that one fallow either. If we don't have funders on side, we have to go and try to bring some funders on side. So it's really a mechanism to say, where are we weak based on the preconditions that then help us to work harder in those areas as we're moving forward. Does that make sense? So that'd be my best comeback to your question in terms of it. Looking at the preconditions of success and then determining and doing kind of a mapping of those to see where you're at as a team. Make sense? And you can just, if you go to Collective Impact Forum and type preconditions of success, they will come up. Over here. We need a little time to go through about 18 slides.
I wanted to get clarity on 2 things. I'm Paula Cope, by the way, forgot that. One was the job of the backbone staff seems huge. And the first question is, are the roundtable and the work groups that you mentioned self-directed, or do you use facilitators or other supports and resources? And then aligned with that, yesterday you mentioned that a lot of organizations want to be the backbone because they assume that they get money. And one question I have is, with all the activities and projects you've listed, when money is funded, where do you see the bulk of the money going?
Yeah, I'm not going to go on the backbone staff. It's a backbone role, and the staff are embedded in it. So if you, again, go to collectiveimpact.org or on the Tamarack site and just Google backbone staff, okay? And that will, or backbone role. There's a couple of seminal papers that we've put together now that kind of look at the 6 key functions of a backbone team. Backbone staffing team, and there are things like organizing meetings, keeping the momentum going. They're keepers of the vision to keep everybody focused on the same common agenda. They're helping to raise money for projects. They're working on high-level policy change. That kind of thing, right? There's a lot of activities that have to occur. I mean, certainly, if you got to organize 100 meetings in 12 months or be part of them, it's a logistical issue too, right? not that big because your partners are doing most of the work, but you're supporting them, you know. The money that you raise at the beginning is for the backbone staff. So if you have an executive director, 1 or 2 project officers, a admin assistant, right, or like a communications person that does all that, you're probably looking at, on average, of a budget between $250,000 to $300,000 because they need operational dollars as well to host meetings and whatever that is a year. And so over 4 years, let's say you run a 4-year campaign, you're needing to raise about $1 million for that campaign to occur. We've never found that to be an issue if it's done properly. And again, if the plan gets laid out the way that I described, you could see why that's not an issue. What was the last question? Sorry, I got the first 2. Right. Well, sometimes, I mean, normally, even the facilitators, they're all part of the collective, and it's part of the assets, and it's part of what they contribute. So we spend very little money, and I strongly encourage people not to hire consultants in this work. Not that I don't want, but I want the consultants to volunteer. They'll get lots of work downstream. But at these early days, we all have to commit to this in some way. And so we sometimes do, because some high-level meetings require fairly extensive knowledge on how to put them together and how to keep them together. And sometimes what they'll do is they will bring in consultants that help them on the overall process, but they try to get as many local resources as possible. And part of it is to build commitment and so forth. Later on, people get paid more, consultants get paid more and that kind of thing, but not at the beginning so much. Yeah. Oh, I've only got 5 minutes. So with those questions that you have, so I have 12 minutes Paul time, and I have 5 minutes United Way time, and if they want to eat, they can go eat over there. Sorry, I'm an anarchist at heart. Okay, let's go through these slides, just so that you know these are what you're going to get. Okay, so, okay, well, this is all part of that last slide, the first steps and then the second steps. So it's just really an understanding of what I call adaptive leadership, that if you're the kind of person that sees a straight road and has to follow it, it's going to drive you crazy, right? So it doesn't mean if that's your strength, you keep your strength, but you have to understand this is an emergent process. My favorite saying is, we build the road as we travel. That means we're constantly rethinking ourselves, but we never travel without a map. So we always have a plan, but the plan is never sacred, right? So we know what we said we were going to do, but we're learning, rapid learning, rapid thinking, rapid readjusting, constantly moving. It's very important in this work, adaptive leadership. When you're in the emergent phase, it's a different kind of leadership. That's all I was trying to say here. Okay, this is sort of around the early days of the Backbone organization. This is kind of like some of the communication processes that you want to undertake. I don't want to underemphasize the value of the database, right? Literally, if you come to a funder with 2,000 people that you're regularly communicating with after 1 year, you can see how impressed that they will be. And then you start segmenting them, and you can say, look, we have all of these top leaders. We have all these people living in communities. You know, we have all these business people. Like, if you start to show them the kind of engagement work you've done, you're able to prove to the funder that you have community consensus. There's nothing sexier than community consensus. Nothing. Here's your engagement strategy. Here's just some of the things that you want to put in. Again, we have tons of resources on the Tamarack site on how to build one of these. Here's kind of like a draft table of contents for a plan. here is something more around a kind of a what an established backbone role looks like. This is just kind of I just sort of showed you how Des Moines was organized, and I wished I was better at PowerPoint. And then my closing thought. So, you know, really, 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 you have to immerse yourself. If you want to do this, start slow. Take 2 years to learn, if that's all you can do. But don't try to do it half-ass, right? Where you sort of come in and you sort of say you're calling it collective impact, but you're not putting the energy into it, right? Don't worry about going slow. It doesn't mean that your network can't hang out for 2 years, learn together, take some courses. There's tons between Collective Impact Forum and Tamarack. There is more training than you can ever shake a stick at, and it's all free. So it's like you can do that all virtually. You can have lunch and learns twice a month, and there will still be more than you can learn. There's so many gatherings now, conferences on different things in terms of running backbone organizations or just large-scale community change. That's all part of it. And I think the other side being then, as you're taking on this work, be considerate then of that period, that 12 to 18 months. Don't just think we're going to get started as quickly as possible, right? It takes that long for a community to adopt something. You're going to get it wrong if you go too quick. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to move from deficit orientation to asset-based thinking, which is incredibly important in all of this. What are the assets we're bringing together to deal with this issue? That's what the collective is. It's a collection of assets that we're bringing together, right? Why are we going out and engaging all of these people? We already know what to do. That's your death. That's the call to death, right? You don't know what to do, because if you did, it would be being done, right? Even if it's just a will thing, you know, you actually end up on the same things, but you didn't have the will to do them before, but now you do, right? Take the time, deeply engage, get frustrated, you know, be happy, smile, cry. It's all important, because the wellness of children, right, that's what we're talking about here. You know, we want the children of Vermont to be the healthiest in the world. What a vision, huh? What a vision. Not just for the children, but for the lives that we all lead. Because if they're the healthiest children in the world, damn it, we're probably the healthiest state in America. You probably already are. Are you? Damn, you guys are good. Okay, thank you all.